Now it's time to talk Jacksonville Jaguars football on the Ourlads Football Network at the Ourlads Football YouTube Channel. I'm your host, Greg DePalma, and if we're talking Jacksonville Jags football, that means we're talking to John Oehser of Jaguars.com. How's it going, John?
Good, Greg. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing good. Thanks for doing this as usual, John. I know it's always a busy time of year, so we always appreciate your time. And this is now where most of the teams are going into skins and shirts kind of deal, OTAs, mini camps, and everybody looks good now. But just quickly, as far as overall, what you felt and what you got as far as a rhythm from the fans, how they felt for the way the Jaguars conducted their draft this season.
The draft, I think good. It was overall, the reviews were positive. Brian Thomas, first round pick, obviously a guy people had heard of. Fans like that. Maason Smith, the second round pick. I think fans were unsure at first what that pick was about because he had the injury. He had a torn ACL in 2022, came back a little slow this year. I think once they figured out what it meant, meaning, hey, this is a guy who, when healthy, can be dominant. I think they warmed up to that one. So the draft made sense. Jarrian Jones, third round. Jarrian Jones, forgive me. Third round makes sense. He fits into the nickel, maybe pushes for outside corner. So those three, I think, sort of stood out.
Okay.
The rest of it, after you get past the third round, especially in this draft, which wasn't particularly deep, you're probably hoping for guys to make the team first year, contribute a little, and then see what happens once they get a year under their belt.
All right. Well, let's go through the picks. And by the way, later on, before I let you go, I'm going to get your take on the schedule. And I want to remind everybody, too, out there that is watching. Not sure if you've already ordered the Ourlads Draft Guide. It's available, of course. This has been available for the past couple of months at Ourlads.com. And even though the draft is over, this is still a great time to get it because you know exactly where to find your scouting reports for your players, for your team, especially Jacksonville. So check this out. It's already available. And the draft review guide, this is last year's draft review guide. The new one's coming out in a few weeks. That's the reason I'm having the discussion with John, because I'm going to take a lot of what John's input is and use that for my report on Jacksonville in the draft review guide. So again, check that out at ourlads.com and make sure to subscribe here on the channel for not just Jacksonville Jaguars football, but football content for all 32 NFL teams and college football. Okay, so let us start with Brian Thomas. Matter of fact, one of the things I did notice before we go into the players one by one, John, is I always try to look at, is there like I'm sure you do too, like what's the headline? What is it that actually looks like there was a plan? Or not. Sometimes it's just accidental, but 9 total players, 6 from the SEC, 2 Big 12, 1 ACC. So all power programs. I also noticed that as far as some of the more positions that require speed, wide receiver, running back, corner, all of these players are really fast. Thomas 4.3, Jarrian Jones 4.3, Prince 4.3, Robinson 4.4. So I did notice that as well. Those are a couple of things, including, of course, having 3 LSU players in the first 5 picks and 2 defensive tackles who played together last year. So pretty cool the way Jacksonville put their draft together. Did you notice anything this year compared to years past that is giving you maybe a way to say, hey, I've got a pattern developing here now?
Well, I think the pattern is Trent Baalke's a Bill Parcells disciple, believes in that approach. And Trent is going to pick big school typically. I mean, there's exceptions, but
sure.
Big school increases your odds. He plays the percentages, meaning if you play at a big school, it increases your odds once you get in the NFL. If you fit prototypes, if you fit measurables, and I think what you said is exactly right. The fast guys are really fast. The big guys, Maason Smith, he looks like a prototypical, Jeffrey Simmons type of defensive tackle. You can look at him and envision him playing in the NFL. You say, this guy's put on this earth to do that. So I think fitting measurables, fitting prototypes, big school, SEC, all these things increase your percentages of working out. And I think that sort of defines what Trent Baalke's drafts are about. If you, it's the old Bill Parcells thing. If you draft exceptions, pretty soon you have a team of exceptions, right? So,
Yeah.
And Trent's gone away from that a little bit. I'm not saying he is an absolute, will never do anything else, but that really fits this year. They wanted to get bigger, stronger, faster. They're bigger, stronger, faster after the draft if the guys can play, which we don't know until training camp, and even in a couple of years.
Okay. Because I was just while you were talking, I was just let me take a look at the last couple of drafts myself, and boy, that's exactly what we saw even last year. It looks like most of the picks early on, especially all Power 5 programs again: Oklahoma, Penn State, Auburn, Florida. The year before that, 2022, Georgia, Utah, Kentucky. Year before that, Clemson, Georgia. So yeah, a ton of this is just, and again, no different GMs. I get that as we go further down the road, but it does seem to be a little bit of a trend there. Okay, so let's start with Thomas, the one of 3 LSU Tigers that were brought on board. And everybody, of course, is going to put Marvin Harrison in a league by himself, but I think Thomas is still one of those 3 or 4 wide receivers in this draft that has the ability 3 or 4 years from now to possibly be the best receiver in this draft. That's how talented he is.
Yeah, and if you talk to draft analysts, which I guess we fall into that category, but in talking to many people for the draft, it was the top 3, and then a lot of people thought that out of the other group, Brian Thomas had the best chance to come in, and I don't think he's going to be a 1 this year, but he had the skill set to eventually be a number 1 wide receiver, to be a big-time player. In the couple OTA practices we've seen, rookie minicamp, he looks at, he can run. He makes things that other guys have to work to do what he does easily, which is what you want out of your first-round pick.
Yep.
He looks smooth. He can catch, athletic, fast. He has a combination. He can get deep, but you also look at him and say, this guy can high point the ball in situations. So all the physical stuff is there. You hear that the game comes easy to him. I think for him, it'll be a case, how fast does he get professional where he takes advantage of all his skills? That is the question for 99% of the guys who come into the league. So I think that's it appears that the only thing to hold him back is himself, which there's no reason to think it will. So I think it's a good pick.
Yeah, and he also has the good ability to go down the field, be a downfield threat. They've already added Gabe Davis. So those are some big-time weapons that Trevor Lawrence has now. Sometimes teams have one guy, especially with the starting group. Looks like Jacksonville has 2 guys that opposing defenses are going to have to be concerned with going deep.
Well, yeah, going deep. And I think the advantage he has, this team, you asked earlier about the fans. Fans look at the history of this team drafting wide receiver, and it's not good. The best they ever drafted was Justin Blackmon. His career ran off the rails for off-the-field reasons. Beyond that, they really haven't. They've taken flyers in first round on guys, and it really worked out. My impression is I didn't cover all those guys, but most of them came in having to be the guy. Okay. Evan Ingram plays for this team. Christian Kirk plays for this team. Travis Etienne plays for this team, and Gabe Davis plays for this team. Yep. All of those guys can factor into the passing game. Brian Thomas Jr. does not have to come in and catch 95 balls for 1,400 yards next year. If he and Gabe Davis strain the defense, if he's a receiver in his first year that makes defenses pay attention to him, he can be very effective catching 700 yards with the balls. And I think he can do more than that. But this offense with Kirk, Ingram, think back to Doug Peterson's offenses in Philly, it's designed to be a 4-receiver, 850-yard, all 8 touchdown group. They're fine if that works. They can all complement each other. If Gabe Davis fits into that and makes that equation happen, Brian Thomas Jr.
Okay.
if Ryan Thomas Jr. comes in and fits into that, then for the first year, he's a good pick.
Yeah, and since we don't really need to come back to wide receiver, let's just I want your opinion on a couple of things here, because once you get past the top three, who's the four? And you've got Parker Washington, of course, late round draft pick last year. And you've got, I see there on the depth chart, this is the Ourlads.com depth chart. They've got posted 4 college free agents. Now, any of those separate, or are these just kind of, okay, flyers on all of them? They've all got talent, or is there one out of those 4 that we need to keep an eye on the most?
Oh, the college free agents?
Correct.
Yeah, your guess is as good as mine.
Okay.
I'm exaggerating that. I'm searching for the name here. Joshua
Cephas.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I was drawing a blank. Out of the group, he's the guy who looks like an NFL player.
Okay.
He's a little he's not big, he's I don't say skinny because he's probably thicker than I am, but he strikes you that he needs to put on a little bulk. He certainly runs and has produced like a guy who can produce in the NFL. I hesitate with any UDFA to say they're going to come in and be the 4th guy, and that's a big step considering the first round picks got to develop to make an impact. So, but out of that group, Cephas is the guy that people are talking about. He'll be the training camp storyline to watch. There's some other guys too. Elijah Cooks, who made the team as a UDFA last year, really impressed. Seth Williams has looked very good. They're sort of they're Cephas with a couple of years of experience on Cephas, if you follow me. They're that developmental UDFA type guy. And then don't forget about Devin Duvernay, who they brought in as a returner. I would think he's the 5th, with Washington having inside track on the 4th right now.
Okay.
With these guys we're talking about having a chance to make them keep 6.
Yeah, by the way, I do have, or Ourlads, the draft guy, does have a scouting report on Cephas as a potential 7th round draft pick. So he is the guy that should stand out, a 4-year starter. He was actually the Frisco Bowl MVP, had 56 career starts, and you can check out the rest of the scouting report if you purchase the draft guide. So
yeah, I mean, he's the guy out of the bunch who you would think they signed with the idea that he could easily force them to keep 6 or be a practice squad guy. That's what Cooks did last year, so they're always open to that wide receiver.
Okay, let's stay on offense, and with the next pick, Javon Foster in round 4. And Foster was a 3-year starter, seems to be more of a power player. But I think this was one of those offensive linemen that when you went into the draft, you said, hey, there's some pretty interesting mid-round offensive linemen available, like Foster, who, when you take a look at his resume in college, pretty impressive. Now, whether that translates or not, who knows? But to be able to get a kid like Foster, who played in the SEC and had a lot of production, I would have to believe the Jags were pretty happy about that.
Yeah, I think you get your offensive linemen one of 2 ways. Every few years, or 2 out of 3, 2 out of 4 years, you draft early, 1st, 2nd round. You assume those guys are going to be starters.
Yep.
Along the lines, every 3 or 4 years, you draft a couple 4th or 5th round that you see has some potential to develop, and then hope that one of those 2 guys, I'm playing percentages here because that's what draft is, hope that one of those develops into either a swing guy or maybe a starter. Foster feels very much like a guy who could do that. He's a huge human being. He's got a lot of SEC experience. All those things are there. So I don't think they obviously don't want to see him on the field this year. They hope that Cam Robinson, Anton Harrison, and Walker Little are their 3, with Walker Little as the swing. So he's in a position where ideally a 4th round tackle is either the 9th active guy if they're worried about losing him, or he's on the practice squad. He's on there. I don't say practice squad. He'll be on the roster.
Yeah.
You hope you never have to play him. You hope he's a 17-game inactive or playing on special teams. But he's in a good situation here because they don't want him to play. If that makes any sense. Yes. So There'll be no pressure on him. You can develop him. Phil Rosher's a good offensive line coach here. If you're a healthy line and a healthy franchise, you're bringing offensive linemen like this along. You're drafting with the idea that they can wait a year to play and then play once they're developed and they understand the NFL. This is their foray into that this year.
Okay. And same question regarding the free agent. I see one of them in there, and that's Stephen Jones. So, matter of fact, Stephen Jones' scouting report is also in the guide because he was a player that was potentially going to be drafted in the 7th round, a 4-year starter, and played at Oregon, a tackle for the first 3 years. So again, similar in a way like Foster, a lot of production, big program, that kind of stuff, and they're able to pick him up as a free agent.
Yeah, he's a guy who physically looks like he should be in the NFL. My understanding is he needs to play much more physically, much stronger to make it in the NFL. I can't really pass judgment on that. They're wearing baseball caps in practice this week. So it's hard to really tell what an offensive lineman's going to be. I have no feel for that. But he's a guy who wouldn't shock you at all to see him on the practice squad. You can probably get him there. Nobody drafted him. So he makes sense as a developmental guy. And if you sign if you sign 5 of these guys over 5 years, maybe one of them sticks and you hit something. So I think that's the percentage there. But physically, he's a Trent Baalke guy. He looks the part.
All right. Now, the final offensive player that they drafted was a running back out of Texas, Keelan Robinson, smaller size kid, kick return ability. So is that the key reason they picked him? Was it, again, the new rules?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
when I said earlier about not expecting much out of this draft past round 4, I should say that with the caveat of they expect a lot out of this draft past round 4 on special teams. I think they saw a relatively thin draft, knowing that there wasn't going to be much 6th or 7th round that was going to impact your offense and defense. They drafted Cam Little, the kicker, who we'll talk about later, and they drafted Robinson. They drafted Robinson because they believe you need 2 kick returners in this day and age. So I'd be very surprised if he's not a major factor on that. He can do it. He's fast. He's got all that. I almost hesitate to analyze much about him because I don't even know what kick return is going to look like yet. And I think everybody's sort of waiting to see.
Yeah,
they believe that he'll fit what they're going to try to do. They, like most teams, have put a lot of time into figuring out what it's going to look like. What they came out with is they believe that you're going to need 2 back there, so teams can't kick away from you. So they think he's going to be a big factor.
We're going to talk a lot more, of course, in the next couple of months when we have you on to preview the season and go over camp and battles and who's progressed and all that stuff. But since this is the last offensive player, I'm going to ask you this with the defense as well. Is there anything else that you believe that the team needs to improve upon this offseason on offense? Now that, again, the draft is over, a lot of free agency is over, there's still players available in free agency.
Yeah.
Do you think that they're set now on offense, or you wouldn't be surprised if they added a player who could be valuable to them somewhere on offense?
Yeah, I'd be surprised if they do it before camp. Offense, and the only reason they do it in camp, I think, is with an injury. They've got, like I talked earlier, they're a big believer that you need 8 offensive linemen in this day and age.
Oh, yeah.
At least 7. They feel like with Walker Little as a swing, they re-signed Tyler Shatley inside. They have a kid named Cooper Hodges, 7th round pick last year inside. That kind of gets you to 8 up there in their point of view. They like Tank Bigsby to back up Travis Etienne, even though he didn't do much last year. So, I'd be surprised if it's a name. I'd be surprised on offense if they're super active anywhere in terms of veterans.
Okay. let's go ahead and switch on over to the defensive side, and we're going to start first of all with their. We'll talk about their top two. Let's talk about their two defensive tackle picks because it's kind of they kind of go together. I mean, they played together last year for LSU, just the 1 year, because Jefferson played first of all for West Virginia. I know that the Jags struggled a little bit down the stretch last season in run defense. So I don't know if this is a big part of that. They got to get younger there. So talk a little bit about the differences between these two players.
Yeah, I think they hope that they can be part of the defensive line wave. I mean, they definitely addressed this offseason being stouter against the run, which went off the rails in the second half of last season. Not off the rails is strong, but it hurt them. So they signed Eric Armstead with the idea, and they're moving to a 4-man front. Devon Hamilton's coming back, nose tackle. Armstead and Hamilton would be the main thrust into trying to get better against the run right now. Maason Smith, Jefferson, you would think are pieces that can give you 15, 20 plays, which again makes you stouter overall because those 15, 20 plays matter in this league.
Yep.
So Jefferson is very much a nose tackle type. He's your space eater. He's your tough guy. There's video of him at one of the bowl games, pulling an offensive lineman's helmet off, nasty, stout, all that stuff that they wanted more of. He fits that. As I said earlier, Maason Smith, he's a guy who, if he plays to potential, he's Pro Bowl, he's special type guy. Now I'm not going to put him in the Pro Bowl because there's a long way to go, but
sure,
physically, he has the traits that if they're right on him, I guess is what I'm saying. He was very dominant when he first came into LSU as a true freshman. Hurts his ACL, comes back, not as dominant in his year back. But the traits are there that if he maximizes it, he's Jeffrey Simmons type guy. He is special, penetrate, all that stuff. Now, so many factors go into a defensive tackle being special, and I can't predict it. But those are the traits he has. Working under Eric Armstead for a year, there's some comparisons there into the kind of player they can be. So, again, Eric Armstead's a high bar, but, they like him. The complement Smith and Jefferson, if they both work out, again, it's the penetrating defensive tackle and it's the space-eating defensive tackle. They're, two completely different players, but you need them both.
Yeah, and again, that's something that we talked about when we were previewing the offseason and we were going over the changes with the coaching staff. And this is very important because there are a lot of, I know Jag fans, most of them understand this, but just to reiterate the point, when you change coordinators, sometimes there's not many changes, especially if it's in-house, but there's some changes as far as scheme that this team is going to go through and have already gone through this offseason.
Yeah, it's they played a 3-4. It was under Mike Caldwell, but if you think Todd Bowles' defenses, 3-4, throwing a lot at you, that's what they were. They produced a lot of turnovers. They were good against the run for a while last year, and then they weren't. So that's when the wheels kind of came off. This year, under Ryan Nielsen, Atlanta Falcons last year, got a lot better under him. You call it a 4-3. It's probably not fair to call it an exact 4-3 in this day and age because everything's so hybrid. But it's if you have to choose a base, 4-3-4, but there's, I think they think of it probably as more of a 4-2-5 with a lot going on in the back. I doubt they'll be in three linebackers very much. I think Foye Oluokun and Devin Lloyd will be the two linebackers with Muma coming in. So it's more about the different roles of safeties and nickels and dimes that are going to differentiate this defense. But certainly they wanted to get more, again, stouter. Armstead. If you think about these guys healthy, Trayvon Walker, Josh Allen, Eric Armstead, Devon Hamilton, Roy Robertson Harris, Maason Smith, They want dynamic, stout, really good players up front. If all those guys are as good as their names and healthy for 17 games, they're a really good front. We'll see how it goes.
And maybe the one that we'll have to keep an eye on is Lloyd. And we talked a lot about him on our last conversation, and he's going to be playing sort of, it looks like he's going to play a different role with the scheme. So, but he's got the talent.
I'm not sure what the scheme is. I mean, I'm not sure what his role is yet. He's a linebacker. They're talking about having him. I mean, my feel with Devin is they're going to do everything they can to get him into see ball, chase ball, and see quarterback, go get the quarterback when we ask you to blitz. His only problem so far in the NFL has been sort of not preparation, but in-play recognition. Sometimes he gets the RPO. He'll jump at something he sees. In-play reading it has hurt him sometimes. But when he's around the ball, when he's in the right position, he has special traits. So I think their task is get him in the right position as much as possible. Well, duh, right? That's what all coaches' tasks are. But unlocking Devin Lloyd, when you combine the guys I just listed off, and you combine, if you assume Tyson Campbell's good, which I think he'll be back after an injury, Devin Lloyd's the one guy who, hasn't been special yet, has special traits. If he's special and those front guys are good, then they're a good defense. We just haven't seen it.
Okay, stick up front. Oh, and by the way, here's just the big differences that I noticed, and then we'll move on from Nielsen coming in, and this shows you the huge difference. Last year, Jacksonville was number 3 in the NFL as far as playing zones, how often they played zone. Atlanta was third in the NFL in playing man last year. That's a big difference. So that's how different the scheme might be. Nielsen, as you mentioned, did improve their pass defense all the way to 8th in the NFL last year, and their sack total doubled from 21 to 42 at Atlanta with Nielsen there. So
and they brought in some personnel to help that, obviously. But it's look, the Jaguars have 2 really good edge players, Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker. If Armstead's healthy, which 10th year guy, you're always concerned a little about that. If Armstead's healthy and playing, that gives you 3 frontline guys on the front of the line. It's probably been since 17 or so where the Jags had that much talent up front, and they may not even have had as much, in that. And those were great defenses. They have a chance, if all breaks right, to be really good up front this year.
And then the other defender up front, they drafted with their final pick in round 7. It was Miles Cole. I mean, this guy is as lengthy as you're going to get in this draft. Not only is he 6'6", but he's got long arms and a huge wingspan. Played Sun Belt for the first 4 years, and then made the one starting season last year with Texas Tech. And he was a player that Ourlads actually thought could have gone as high as the 4th round.
Yeah, I think this classifies as in what overall most people thought was a weak draft. You're sitting there at number 7. I mean, in the 7th round. Do we bunt or do we swing? And I think you swing with this.
Yeah.
And if it hits, then you've got a real find. And I think they had already looked earlier. Like I said, they drafted Cam Little, the kicker. They had taken couple of defensive backs, DeAndre Smith and Jarrian Jones, to address some stuff in the secondary and special teams. They drafted Robinson to address special teams. So they felt like they had all the stuff they needed. They don't need Miles Cole this year. Would they love it if over the first 2 or 3 years of his career he develops into something like what you're talking about? Absolutely. So take him in the 7th round so you don't have to sign him as a UDFA. But what you said is exactly right. The traits, you're always playing percentages in the 7th round. The traits of this guy, sort of like Maason Smith, right? If he works, the traits are there for special. And that's what the end of the draft's all about.
Absolutely. And then one more player in free agency following the draft the team signed that could have gone in round 7 and is also scouting report. Ourlads, you got to get this guy because not only are the draft picks in there, but some of these college free agents they signed have scouting reports, including Andre Carter, who was a 3-year starter, transferred from Western Michigan to Indiana. So that's a guy that sticks out. We'll find out. It looks like it's going to be a very competitive group of players, though, when you take a look at that defensive front.
Yeah, my understanding on Carter, it would be a little surprising if he's not at least on the practice squad. I mean, and when we talk about practice squad this day and age, most people watching this are hardcore football fans, so they get it. Practice squad is a much different assignment now than it was before COVID. When you're talking practice squad, you're talking about a guy who could potentially be up at various times. He's basically a part of your team. Andre Carter has a chance to be in that group. It'd be a little surprising if he's not at least practice squad. We want to see what he can do second year guy, which are very important for roster building. You heard good things about him along those lines.
And then last year's draft, mid-round guys that need to make that next step, Abdullah and Lacey. So
Lacey, well, I mean, Lacey's been a little over criticized. He was part of the rotation last year. He's never going to be sack guy that people notice. When they drafted him with the idea, hey, he can be in your top 8 or 9. You need 8 or 9 good offensive linemen. Defensive linemen. And he took a step toward that. His rookie year was fine. Okay. Wasn't great, but it was fine. Abdul is the guy, really didn't get on the field last year. In this scheme, where does he fit? Strong side backer is what they're talking about. It's a big year for him to sort of see if, okay, they drafted him into this defense last year. All of a sudden, no fault of his own. There's a new coordinator this year, new scheme. A pure 3-4 edge rusher is probably what he's best at. How he fits in this, I think that's a storyline of training camp, and I don't know the answer. But it's certainly something that they would like to get production out of him, at least as a 4th rusher. We'll see. It's something to watch. Hard to tell this week with the baseball caps. Great.
Yeah. And the fact is that even though it's a new coaching staff, maybe this is, I would look at it as, well, I would always try to look at everything as a positive, but I would think that this would be a positive because, again, Nielsen knows if this is one of the better coaches, knows how to coach as far as coaching defensive linemen, especially the edge rushers. This is a guy that could help Abdullah and Carter and Lacey. And so, I think they should be pretty excited about the switch.
Yeah, it's young talent. They've got 3 or 4 guys that you just mentioned that you would think they're pretty good in terms of frontline guys. They would love 2 or 3 of these guys we're talking about to step up and be really good members of the rotation. But like last year, Dwan Smoot was sort of a complimentary player. He's moved on. Because of an Achilles injury, he never quite reached what they hoped. So they need guys really to sort of be better complementary players than was the case last year. Because, again, their edges had 27 sacks between them. Allen and Walker were outstanding. They just didn't get much production anywhere else. Need to, increase other place production 50-60% over what it was last year.
All right. Now, sticking on defense, let's talk about the corners that they brought in. You've already mentioned them a few times. Jones from Florida State and Prince from Ole Miss, both with 4.3 speed. Jones has 5 years of starting experience. He's a guy that most people would believe would be a slot guy, but we'll see. And the pass defense actually has struggled the last couple of years at Jacksonville. And so adding a couple of DBs in the draft, that was a no-brainer, of course. They also added in free agency. So what do you think about these 2 kids and what they think about them?
Well, Jarrian Jones, he's been a little criticized or wondered about among fans. Well, he was a nickel at Florida State, and you take a nickel in the 3rd round. My thought on that is he was nickel in a really good Florida State defense.
Yes.
To me, the league is trending toward outside is outside and nickel is nickel, and nickel's a starting position in this day and age.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I think they drafted Jarrian Jones. My thought is with that idea, I'm not saying he can't go eventually beat out Darby on the outside and then move inside. Maybe that's the deal. I think it's a lot to ask for a rookie. So I think they drafted him with the idea that nickel is its own position, and I guess nickel's one of those positions that you may not value in the off season, but if you don't have a guy who can play there, you sure value it in week 8. So I think that's what they drafted him was about. Prince, I think, is realistically more, let's get him on special teams right now. He can really run, he can really cover, and then let's see where he fits into the cornerback room. There's some guys they've drafted in the past, Monteric Brown, some more depth like that. Where Prince fits in, can he come in and be the 4th or 5th this year? I think they're hoping he can.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned special teams, because when you take a look at their scouting reports, well, Jones makes a lot of sense. He's a press guy, press experience. They're going to turn this to a press team, or at least that's what you're thinking. And then you take a look at Prince. That's the exact opposite. He's scouted to be a zone guy. So maybe it's, hey, you know what? We like him for special teams first. We can try to figure out the rest later. And who knows? I mean, corners can play safety, not in today's day and age. So I'm sure they've got a plan for him. But I thought that was interesting. But again, the Jones one, I think, is the really, obviously not just because he's 3rd round, but I've seen a lot of tape on him, and I think Jags fans should be excited about him. I think he's going to be a really good addition. So
yeah, they love him. He's a 5th year senior.
Oh yeah,
a lot of experience. There's a little bit of a win now mode here in Jacksonville with the way that they went about free agency. To me, you draft a very experienced, 23, 24-year-old guy coming in. You expect that to be more ready than if you were drafting a kid who was, a 2nd year out. So I think they hope he's plug and play, factoring in the secondary immediately. And when you draft that level of college experience, you don't expect him to be developing in 4 years.
And then the final player to talk about is the place kicker that you mentioned, Cam Little from Arkansas, who, yes, has a scouting report. There's only, I think, 6 maybe special teams kickers who have reports on him in the draft guide, and Little is one of them. So they're going to hope Little wins the job?
Yeah, I think it's his job to lose. In this day and age with the practice squad, it's a little easier to keep a safety net kicker. You can keep 2 around. I would think they probably do that. They certainly hope that he wins the job. He's got leg talent. The joke around here, he looks like he's about 14 years old. He's a small kid.
Yeah.
Special teams coach went out to scout him, banged the table for him, loves him, thought he was the best kicker in the draft. I don't know exactly what to say about a kicker to make it interesting for your readers or your viewers, except that they really think that with the new kickoff rules, being able to put the ball at certain spots matters. Accuracy matters on kickoff. They think he has that. They also think he can obviously place kick. They think he has range. So it would be surprising when you draft a kicker if he's not your guy, because you don't want to take it. So I would think that happens. Haven't really seen enough of it in 2 OTAs we've been able to view. Haven't really seen enough to comment on him beyond that.
And even though he looks, you wouldn't think of it looking at him like he's not the Mevis kid, but he can kick 60 yards. That's what they say. Yeah. So he's got a powerful leg.
A lot of leg talent, which again, you would expect a kid taken in the draft to have the leg talent, because you can find kickers who are accurate after the draft.
Are there any, and I asked you this on offense, so would you say that there would be a spot at all on defense that you think that they might be looking at regarding free agency? Or do you think they're done?
They could conceivably, they already did it a little bit with corners. They picked up some veterans a couple of weeks ago, Edmonds. So they already sort of made their move. to give them veteran options in case these young guys don't quite fit, in case training camp, you get into camp and you just sort of get a feel for, hey, this guy doesn't do this quite well, we need X. They gave themselves numbers and viable options in the secondary. They haven't really done that at edge rusher. Travis Gibson is a guy they got from Tennessee. They like his potential as the third guy. Edge rusher is the one spot that you could see either early season, if they feel like they're not getting enough complimentary play after Trayvon and Josh. People talk about that edge rusher spot as a possibility for that.
Okay.
I think even with Trevor Lawrence's contract being up, I think there'll be money for a move left in case they need it. Trent Baalke likes to do that. That's the spot that will be talked about. I don't know that they do it before camp because I think that they will continue to look at camp. I think they'll still try to look at their roster and say, what exactly do we need?
And this gives, like we mentioned before, this gives a great opportunity for someone like Abdullah to take that job and run with it.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure that's exactly what they're hoping for. Okay. So let's talk about, let's just wrap up the college free agent part. So I've got Cephas, Jones, and Carter looking like the three top college free agents they signed after the draft. I know we didn't go through much some of these other guys on defense, but Proctor, I believe he's maybe another player, isn't he?
Yeah, he was a combine and a Senior Bowl guy, safety from Ohio State. He again, with college free agents, you look for stuff that makes him stand out. In fact, he went to the combine. Physically, he can do it. When you watch him, and the little I've watched him, he looks like a kid who belongs in the NFL. So he's a guy to watch in training camp as well. Everybody else, look, usually your UDFAs, often they don't come out of the list that we're talking about on video right after the draft. It sort of darts at a board. But to me, those guys, Cephas, Proctor, Carter, and Jones, kid from Oregon, those are the guys that make sense to watch. They have the traits. They have a line on their resume that makes them worth watching.
And Proctor has a write-up because he's a potentially fifth to seventh round grade is what Ourlads has him, and a 3-year starter, as you mentioned, from Ohio State. So, yeah, again, Draft Guide has not just the draft picks, but 3 of the free agents they signed afterwards. Matter of fact, the only player that does not have a write-up is Keelan Robinson. That is it. Okay. Now I want to ask you before we close up here about the schedule. So what was the first impression that you had? Is there what sticks out most of all regarding the 2024 schedule?
It starts tough. The first 4 games are all against teams who made the playoffs last year. It's Miami, Cleveland, Houston. I'm drawing a blank on the other one.
Miami, Cleveland, Buffalo, and Houston.
Yeah, Buffalo, which again might be the toughest of the bunch, if one of the others isn't the toughest of the bunch. And then you have Indy, also a winning team last year in Week 5. So look, every schedule they spend that much time breaking it down, saying, "Oh boy, this stretch is going to be brutal," because by the time you get to Week 7, everything changes. But that early part, if you're asleep at the wheel, if you don't come out strong, every one of those teams, if you don't play well, can beat you. I also think then you've got London. There's back-to-back London. They went 2-0 in London last year. They feel like London should be an advantage for this team. But then you come back after London, I think it starts in Week 9, with a stretch where you've got 4 NFC teams, all of whom are good. It's Philadelphia, Green Bay, Minnesota, and Detroit, all coming out of that London thing before you've even got to a bye. So when I look at this, I think the Lions are going to be good. I think the Packers might wind up being that 4. I mean, they're ascending. Yep. Philadelphia, you don't quite know what they are, but I kind of trust they're going to be good. And then every time League thinks that Minnesota's down, they wind up being 11-6 or better, right? I mean, isn't that kind of there? So that stretch, on paper, if the Jags can get to their bye within a couple of games, they have a chance at the end to reel people back in. They play 4 of their last 6 in the AFC South. But getting there, if you're a schedule guy, which again, I'm really not, but on paper, based on last year, getting to week 12 still in it, that's the task, because it's on paper a very tough schedule. You got Houston sitting there, those first 4, and then that second 4 that I talked about, it's a tough schedule. But you know what? The guy you talk to from Houston is talking about their tough schedule. Because within the division, they're all pretty close to the same. But the stretches to me are September and then right after the bye. And then right after London.
Yeah, because like you said, once they get out after the bye, and I think it's the way the schedule should be, is where you play within your division late.
Yeah.
And so, as you mentioned, 4 of the last 6 in the division. And, it's possible the Jets and the Raiders, if they play like last year, those are winnable games. So,
sure.
But that was last year. That's why I'm with you. I don't really go into the schedule except, hey, when's the bye? Do they have London? What's the prime time? That's the only thing that really concerns me, because the whole thing of predicting schedules is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's as you are, I'm sure. I'm asked every year, how tough is it? But, well, it's tough based on the opponents and where they are, which you already kind of knew in January. Yes. Where they put the games is a little bit, Jaguars fans, like every fan thinks the league hyped him up and was against him on the schedule. Jaguars fans are mad about XYZ. To me, usually good teams make hard schedules look manageable. Bad teams make easy schedules look brutal. So, and
they play well in London, right? Jacksonville, that's like a home away from home. Germany, wherever.
They beat Atlanta and they beat Buffalo last year. So the Buffalo game was one of their better wins. So yeah, they usually play well there. This year, the quirk is they're playing back to back again. They were the first team ever to do that last year. So, logically, you would think they have at least a preparation edge of knowing how to handle that. So, yeah. In a league where everything's decided on, 7 points or less, one little edge matters. Maybe that's their little edge.
And their opponent divisions are going to be AFC East and NFC North. Correct. Yes. Right.
Which are tough, but guess what? It's pro football.
Yeah. Just go out, take care of business.
Right.
If you think you're a good team, and everything else take care of itself.
Right. And it's the old thing. You follow long enough. That brutal early schedule, start hot, win 3 or 4, all of a sudden you feel like you're on top of the world. So that, this conversation, analyzing the schedule, changes so much every Sunday once the previous week's games are over, that it's folly to try to break it down at this point. But it's fun to do as well.
And then also just want to remind everybody, you have the Wednesday, if it's still the same, you have the Wednesday Huddle Up podcast.
Yes. That's with Bucky Brooks of NFL Media. And then I do a weekly Ozone podcast, weekly during the season, bi-weekly maybe during the off season, where I talk to an individual Jags player. We sit down and get inside their heads a little bit. So it's always fun.
John, it's always fun talking about the Jags with you here, and I appreciate it as always. And I can't wait to talk to you around training camp, preseason, if for any reason, just because that means we're that much closer to the start of the season.
No doubt.
Thanks, John.
Greg, thank you.